Welcome to Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things, the podcast show. I'm your host, Carrie Roberts, and today I am so thrilled to have another extraordinary guest, Mr. Russell Miller. Welcome, Russell. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Carrie. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we met about a year and a half ago, and I loved all the work that you were doing in the theater space. You've been in the theater space doing operations, producing for over 25 years, but I want to go back for a moment and really kind of dive into how did you get into the arts in the first place? Like, what was that first moment as a kid or a teen where you realized, I love the arts and I want to potentially do something with it?
Great question, and it feels like such a long time ago now as well to answer it. But and it really was, I think, going back to my very, very youngest years, and my family were all very, very theatrical. My father was a technical manager at the local theatre, and my mother was an actor and a director at an amateur level, but went on to become a director of the National Drama Festival. So she directed essentially the events of the festival back in the UK. And I think because of that, and my grandparents and my uncle and all sorts, it just became something that I probably didn't have much choice in, to be honest, Kerry, from the get-go when everybody's doing it around you. But I really just had that chance to sort of get on stage, I think, at the age of about 9 or 10, just a little chorus part, just sort of tottering about the stage there, and just thoroughly enjoyed it. And I remember it so vividly even now. And it was that moment, I think, of just probably wanting to go off a little bit when I was that young, I imagine. And that really carried on for a number of years, and I sort of learned my craft, as it were, on the stage, and did that and loved it and enjoyed it, and then really wanted to do something that was theatrical but not necessarily on stage. I think the days of showing off on stage had sort of come to an end, and I wanted to do a little bit more off stage, so ended up going backstage and doing some crew work and some stage management as I got a little older, and then just sort of worked my way around all the different areas really, until at such time as I was sort of old enough to start to look at it as a job. And that really, I think, started at about 16 when I was working backstage and got employed there to become just a sort of a general assistant, to go and do anything from follow spots to operate the soundboard and the lighting board, and start getting paid for it. And I've been volunteering for a couple of years, which I, really, really am glad that I did now, because whilst, I worked lots of hours for nothing, it was a really great investment in me, and it taught me a lot. And I worked with some amazing people back then. And really, that was the apprenticeship, I think, if you like. And so I just sort of moved on from there.
For a second, because I think what's interesting is,
sure.
So many people think of the arts as, you have to be on the talent side. And you're saying here at a young age, you did a little bit of the talent side, but you were really fascinated by the behind the scenes, and that those places are actually where you can get paid. Like you said, being a stage manager, lighting design, sound design, all these different pieces. Plus, of course, you've had your family that was engaged in it as well, so you're around it all the time. I'm curious, do you recommend to kids or teens or young adults that are pursuing the talent side to also get into the behind the scenes, because it could be lucrative for them now or in the future?
Well, again, another really good question. I think it really depends what floats your boat. And if that really isn't for you, then there's no point trying to shoehorn your way into it. I think for me, my personal experience, I just wanted to be in and involved and around the theatre as much as physically possible. And it kept me off the street, kept me, in good company. And I think from that perspective, if you want to be on stage, there are so many things you can do as well. And it was just about whether you have the time and the inclination to just immerse yourself in anything. And I didn't care what I did. I cleaned toilets, I tore tickets, I did the lights. It didn't matter, as long as I was there and around it and around the people and the buzz and the feel of the industry, which to this day still gives me goosebumps when I'm working. So that's pretty precious.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that. I've actually, we've met and talked before. I've been a dancer my whole life. I've done some behind the scenes stuff. And I'm the same. I love it
Yeah.
all. There's something really exciting about kind of bringing a show together. So you had done this apprenticeship in the UK. You said, kind of high school age. I'm from the US, so I feel like Europe in general is always just more open to the arts than the US. They seem to support it a little bit more than the US. Was that something where you were like, okay, this is what I'm pursuing, and people were pretty supportive and you went to school for that, or did you go right into work?
A little bit of both, actually. And I was so fortunate for that, because as I was working in my local theatre, I was looking to go off to university and really wanted to further my education. And it was that real dichotomy of time where I'd been offered a job as a permanent management staff at 19 or however old I was at the time. And it was a real choice of, do I go off to university or do I take this full-time job that was at the time paying good money for someone at 19 still living at home? It seemed like a good thing, but at the same time I wanted to spread my wings and get my degree and all of that. So as it happened, unfortunately, I had an opportunity where I could study locally, and the business put me through that part of my development so that I could still get an education but still also take on that role in the management team. So I was completely blessed, and so I'm so thankful even to of all of the management team that supported me at that time and in that period, because it was quite a decision, and really just was the game changer for me, I think, in terms of being able to really understand how the theatre worked operationally and take that next step up, really.
And, now more than ever, it's really challenging for people to get work in the arts. We're not able to go to the theater and do the things we have. Do you have any advice for people, when they're at that age coming out of college and they're looking for work in the theater, either in general or especially now in 2021, of how to kind of get work in those fields?
I think it goes back to basics of your time and your passion, and being able to just network, I think is a major thing. And but also to be able to give your time and your energy. And I think the bonus of being and having that energy at that point is that you do definitely feed off that. And I know that when I was doing 90-hour weeks, I couldn't be doing that now. But the reason I was doing it was because I was so energized and so excited about the work that I was doing. And I think if you have that energy and you can bring that to an employer at whatever level, volunteering or apprenticeship, anything like that, is a fantastic way to really cut your teeth. And I know that employers now are looking for the balance of experience and education. And I think that's a very difficult line, but one that certainly, as I would look at now as an employer, I certainly would be looking to make sure that someone has those experience skills, and the more you can do in, to that effect, the better.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. And I want to, you've, like you said earlier, you've been in this space for over 25 years professionally, working within the UK, New York City primarily. And you worked on some shows like Guys and Dolls, which this version showcased Ewan McGregor and Patrick Swayze. You did some work with Cirque du Soleil when they did some Broadway stuff. Jake Gyllenhaal, Sunday in the Park. You worked at the London Olympics. I'm curious to know, is it different to work with a movie star who comes into Broadway, into the theater, versus working with people who are always in the theater? That sounds like a
little.
yes.
I think that the I'm just making sure that's not a loaded question. I think the wonderful thing about working with people at that level, at that sort of A-list movie level, is that they've kind of done it. That they don't really have anything to prove. And certainly from my experience of the people that I met and got to know, they're all quite wonderful and quite professional. And that really sets the bar. And I think if there were ever any attitudes within any of the creatives or the cast and associates along with those productions, having someone like that at the helm at an A-list level really keeps everybody in check. But that happens probably across all disciplines, be it television, film, and theatre. And again, certainly I feel blessed that the people that I've had the privilege to work with have been so wonderful and really have made such an exceptional difference and commitment to the productions that they've worked on. And so in that respect, yes, I think maybe some that are coming through the ranks, sort of that have a bit more to prove, might be a little bit more tricky. But that's a big debate.
Well, yeah. Well, I think too, I mean, not only just, the level of fame or how long they've been doing it, I would assume that, again, I'm a dancer. I know it's different when we do film versus on a stage. How is it kind of different when you bring these actors that are used to being on a set, on location with a camera in their face versus a live audience with just one stage? How does that differ?
Well, I think for the most part, anybody that's taking on any of those critical stage roles have some understanding of how to work the stage. And certainly, I think maybe with some sort of reality program stars that might be a little bit more fresh to all of that perhaps don't have, they perhaps haven't learned their craft rather in the same way as some others may find that a little different. But that's obviously what the rehearsal period is for, and that's a very stringent process. So I think that probably gets everyone in good shape enough, and certainly the people that are at the very peak of their game are pretty well versed in most of those sets, yes.
So when you're doing a show, so for example, Guys and Dolls, that has been around for years, and you are asked to come help produce a show or any of the operations or whatever you did for that show, how do you decide what you should keep the same, because that's how it's been done for years, versus creating maybe a new spin on it for a show that's been around for a long period of time?
Yeah, well, Guys and Dolls, as a good example, was a revival, and Michael Grandage directed that, and he did a fantastic job. And his creation there was visionary. I think it was beautiful. And then between Michael's work that is done over a period of time leading up to moving to the venue, thereafter was a chap called Jamie Lloyd who was the sort of the resident director, and he would very much stay and be on point to make sure that what had been set up and had been rehearsed stayed, and that all the creases were ironed out, ready for opening night. And that's the biggie, I think, in terms about the original crafting of a piece and what the director sees, which may well be driven by the producer's original vision, but certainly in this particular instance, what the director has seen and how that vision then gets put onto stage, and then how that remains good and that the quality is kept in, so that everybody that saw it on the first night gets the same experience as those that are going to see it, in 3 months' time thereafter. So it's really important to have those measures in place, but invariably it's all down to the vision.
Yes. So how does that differ when you are given the opportunity to create something completely new? You and your team get this opportunity to bring something to life. It hasn't been done before. Is that something that you enjoy more? I mean, I assume there's pros and cons to it. What's your feeling to shows like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, my producing role now is relatively new by comparison to my operational role, which has been for the lion's share of my career. So I'm really experiencing this firsthand now, which is phenomenal. And everything that we're creating at Freedom Theatricals is really original content. So we're absolutely getting into the groove of all of that. And what we've decided to do in this particular instance is move towards music productions. So we're working with a wonderful chap called Spencer Proffer, who has a company called Meteor 17. And he's a music guy, and he's very passionate, very connected, and is doing a lot of film and documentary work all based around music. So between Meteor 17, myself and my partner, Corey Brunish, who's 3-time Tony Award winner, is phenomenal. We've all been working with each other now for quite a little while. And what we're doing is we're crafting content for the stage that has come from the screen, all music centric. So creating your own stuff is quite wonderful. And I've really missed it. Not that I've I started off as a producer, but I've missed creating something from scratch and owning it and directing it in terms of the vision of it. And that's what's quite special. And as a result, now we've got projects moving ahead with Don McLean and the American Pie track, which is wonderful. And that will be a television doc based upon music. And then it will translate into a theatre show. But we're also at the same time working with Stephen Schwartz to do a documentary on his life and his world in music specifically for television. So whilst that won't cross over to a theatre stage, Stephen's done a fair bit of the theatre work as well, you know, having done Wicked and Pippin and Godspell and some amazing things, and he's a fantastic talent there. So we're really, in answer to your question, the opportunity to create, I think, is very different to reinvigorating original material, but it does allow us to focus on our strengths. And I think that's the underlying theme here, is that we all have our part to play within all of that. Spencer in music and Corey in his producing experience and my operational and business and creative skills too. So it's quite a composite, but very exciting. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, and I want to touch on that because when you and I had met back in 2019, I remember you saying, oh, I'm working on a new Broadway show. I can't tell you what it is. We're working on it. And then COVID happened and we reconnected, and you said, oh, actually what we're doing now is we're now kind of making these films and these documentary films. And I remember saying to you, I was like, that's so smart, because I think so many people were like, oh, I can't do this. Well, I guess I'm just going to sit here. And you and your team said, how can we do something a little bit different? How can we still be creative? How can we still, create something even though COVID is going on? And I'd love for you to talk about kind of the transition that your team has made from doing live production to now these kind of film and documentaries, and what that process is like, especially now during COVID.
Well, I mean, what a journey that's been, and COVID has been, terrible, obviously for many, many reasons, and the theatre industry is really on its knees at the moment, which is horrendous, and we're all feeling the pain of that. Again, I have to say, in terms of the timing, we had already started to adapt what we were doing and really question what we wanted to do with theatre, actually quite a bit before land, fortunately, because we really agreed between ourselves that we felt that theatre can be a lot more things to a lot more people, and the only way to really do that is to make theatre more accessible. And there's a little bit of pushback from the community in some areas, not all, but in some, in terms of embracing some of the newer online things that actually COVID has kind of forced now into you having to adapt to streaming content and such like. And so we were really looking at that as our horizon view quite some time before COVID hit. We really wanted to focus in on making theatre more accessible, doing things that would be very commercial, again very music centric, but also that had the ability to sort of be quite linear in terms of how we can dovetail television content into theatre content, into online, into books and magazines and all of that sort of stuff. And within our internal network, really had all of the skill sections to really make almost a one-stop shop to be able to exercise and bridge the gap that there is potentially between theatre and music and television and social media and all of those good things. And I really feel that we have to adapt, and I think that what COVID has, if anything, given us positively is the ability to look at things differently and embrace a little bit of change and opportunity. I think it's really easy to sit and feel sorry and be down, but I think that there's always someone and different businesses that are having more of a heart. I think we've just tried to be positive about what this might be able to bring and rise up to the challenge, rather than sit and wait for someone to say, okay, well, theatres are back open now, back to the run of the mill, because style is not really run of the mill. So we're trying hard to be nimble and to just be positive.
Yeah, and I think it's all about adapting, and that's what creative people do well. And I love that your team has done that, and I'm excited to see all these things come to life. One of the things that you told me that I thought was really interesting when I said to you, how are you doing this documentary? Like, how, you always see like pictures of like a field or something else. How are you getting? And you said, oh, well, Carrie, there's there's already libraries that have some of those basic images, and I did not know that. I was like, oh, that must make it easier during COVID, that if you need something where I want to show the background of a garden or whatever, you can kind of implement that in the creation process, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and I'm no television documentary director, and this is wonderful opportunity for me because I'm learning so very much, but it is great, and it really, depending on what the director wants, between talking heads and imagery, it really is all there. So it's a really fascinating process to go through, and we're blessed with so much content right now. It's exciting.
And are you able to share when maybe the estimated time for these kind of three pieces that you're creating will come out, or where people could see them, or we're not really sure at this point?
Well, there's a few things that will go into production this year. All things, pending with COVID, and anything that we do, obviously we want to ensure that we're keeping crews and everybody safe as we go forward. But there is intention that we make some headway this year. That's exciting in itself, in that, particularly with the Stephen Schwartz documentary, that Wicked the movie is sort of in the mix. So we're keen to make sure that there's some alignment with that. Sort of it's a candle on things, but keeping everybody safe and doing things within the confines of that really is the primary concern. And we're starting to move and look at theatre again, which is wonderful. And literally, we're having conversations this very month now in terms of mobilizing projects that were sort of sitting dormant, that we were due to go and workshop as of May last year, that didn't happen, and various other projects there that we want to pick up and we want to move with. And providing that the people we work with on those projects come with us as well, then hopefully we can start to make things that are not just good entertainment and regular entertainment in terms of what you would expect to see in the theatre, but things that you can enjoy and experience in different ways at different times forever. And that, I think, is maybe the legacy of the positive legacy of COVID.
Yes, I agree. I saw, I don't know if you saw, but I saw Hamilton when it came out on Disney Plus. I did not get the chance to see it on Broadway, still would love to.
Yeah,
but it was kind of interesting,
show.
to watch it on TV, because, even if I saw, I wouldn't not necessarily get to be that close. And so being able to see like the sweat and what's happening, and there's something really interesting about that. But then of course you miss, the moments in the theater. So it's kind of neat that we're seeing this mix, and that when we can go back to seeing theater, that we have both of these opportunities to view it in different ways.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, that, Kerry, because the whole experience of streaming, I think, has always been almost frowned upon a little, in terms of the primary focus for any producer and creative has always been putting bums on seats and having a live audience. And that's really important for everybody, not just the audience, the actors and the creatives as well, because you really gauge the value of a production with people in an audience. So any streaming that's ever happened has really been an add-on, and it's always been looked on as tertiary. And so I think looking at things differently now and kind of flipping that a little, really just by being smart about camera positions and how you can make it more of an experience and pay more attention to it, actually makes it a really, really good experience for the viewer sitting at home, who may never, ever be able to either, get to or afford to pay. I mean, Hamilton tickets are not cheap, to pay those Broadway prices, or you're waiting for it to come on tour and be able to see it locally. And so when you think that those shows really are happening at any one time, just singularly, it's a great way of experiencing it if you can get the experience right for the viewer. And Hamilton certainly proved that. And I think that's the bit that we all should learn from and say, let's do this, because the opportunity is there and people deserve that accessibility, I think.
Yes, I agree. And another thing that you recently did was you wrote a children's book called Broadway Baby. And I know that you did this because you had someone you worked with. They just had a baby, and you were like, I have to give them a book about what we do. You couldn't find anything. And so you decided to write this book. So what was that experience like, authoring a children's book? Where did the inspiration come from? And, what did it kind of look like in the end?
Well, that has all been quite surreal, if I'm honest. It all started with Corey and Jessica, Corey Brunish and Jessica, his wife, who had a baby girl, the lovely Olivia, just over a year ago. It was a year in August, and I wanted to give to them a theatrical book as a present at that point, and there was just nothing out there, and it was really frustrating because I knew exactly what I wanted, and I hunted and online and all of that, and there was just nothing. So I found them an alternative gift, but committed to myself that I would put pen to paper. And then very quickly things moved on and ended up getting, now we're a best playbill and 5-star reviews across the board. And it's just been incredible and really a wonderful team. Judith Proffer, who wrote the book with me, is a big theatre fan. And the composite of writing a book with her, knowing that I'm having that benefit of a fan's perspective and my professional experience, having worked and managed theatres for many years at West End, and then more really, just great what we were writing was true to theatre, and so then that was the big for me, that it needed to be something that really was an introduction to children at the earliest age that gave them confidence, just as it gave me confidence early on. But I never had anything like this as a book to relate to or to immerse myself in from the earliest age. And this is a book that's, you know, anywhere from sort of baby in a crib be read to kids in, you know, at the age. So it really has been wonderful and a beautiful tonic for me to be able to focus on something that's so warm and friendly in this COVID time. And I lost my father in March, not as a result of COVID, but that in itself. And he'd been a part of, you know, seeing the images and the illustrations that were put together. So it holds a really special place in knowing that he's been a part of that and that the publishers gave me a page to dedicate to him. So that's been really nice. And that, you know, Corey, as my business partner at Freedom Theatricals, is involved in that too. And I adore him and Jessica and Olivia. And so it feels like a really friendly and warm relationship there. And Judy was a pleasure to work with, and the whole creative team, Spencer and Hugh and Yoko, who illustrated it from Japan. It's just been great because we were all so aligned on making it diverse and aligning and making it accessible and really breathing some theatre into it. So as you can tell, I'm kind of in love with it. It's been a wonderful journey for me.
Yes, I love that, and sorry to hear about your father, but so wonderful to have him as a piece of it as well. And the illustrations are adorable. I think the whole concept is just so great for
really
boys or girls, for young kids, like you said. You know, it's interesting as I hear you talk, you know, you said you did a little bit of the kind of singing in the beginning, and then you've done operations, you've done production, you've done theater and film, and now you're writing books. You know, and to me, that's such a true creative, somebody who can do and is open to doing so many different things. Do you find yourself being somebody who is constantly kind of looking for ways to evolve and create? Or do these opportunities just kind of present itself and you're like, okay, let me just see what I can do?
Wow. I mean, I never really, once I stopped acting as a young man, if you like, I moved straight into theatre administration after all of the other stuff. And really that's all I'd done. And so I think the creativity that I missed is now what sort of grew more freely. And so whilst there's been all sorts of things that I've had ideas on over the past and really haven't wanted to explore them because the work that I've done has been so, I loved every moment of running the West End and working for ATG as the company that I was working for there. Howard Panter and Rosemary Squire, who set that company up minutes ago, are an absolute pleasure, and they really are theatre people and have thoroughly enjoyed that. And that taught me a lot. And I think now being able to look back at that and think, well, I didn't want to create them because I was creating my own thing in a very commercial theatre business in operations. And then having moved out of that role, it was an opportunity to say, well, how can I sort of quench this thirst now that I have? And as we sat down and started putting ideas together and they all started to bubble and float to the surface, suddenly we had things that were really sort of starting to take motion. And so it's been incredible, really. And I'm so thankful. It really has wonderful.
Yeah, I love that. I think, for so many people, the goal is to find a career doing something that they enjoy, they love, they're good at, they get paid for. In Japan, they call it ikigai. It's one of my favorite words. It really combines all of those things. And it sounds like you're doing that. And in the arts, which is a really hard space to do that in. Do you have any advice for people that either specifically want to be in the arts and make it a full-time career, or just in general, in finding something that they are passionate about, they're great at, they love, that can help people, they get paid for? Any advice here for them?
Yeah, I think you have to listen to your gut. I mean, it's really easy to get wrapped up in, I've got to study and I've got to specialize in because I want to do this. But, I think over the course of your adult life, certainly you get so many things that happen and so many dreams and so many aspirations. And I think sometimes it's worth just stopping and if you can, just breathing for a second and just thinking about what really makes you tick. And to ask that question of yourself in terms of what you really want. And it took that for me to really switch my direction and realize, actually, I know what I'm doing here and I really enjoy this and it gets me out of bed. And I touch wood, I've never been in a position where I've done a job and gone, oh, I don't want to get up today. I haven't experienced it, so I can't imagine what it's like. But I feel so blessed to be able to say, I get this, I love it, I want to work today. And it gives me goosebumps. So I think when the goosebumps stop is the chance to say, okay, well, what do we do? And so follow your heart, I think, and listen to your instincts and explore it. Regrets are one thing, but to have not had an opportunity to at least have a go is a bigger regret than, having a go and failing, to my mind.
Yes, I love it. I 100% agree. If people want to connect with you, they want to learn more about your work, where is the best place that they can do that?
Well, our website for our theatrical productions and partnerships is freedomtheatricals.com. And then the website for the book, which is Broadway Baby, is broadwaybabybook.com. And you can also find that on the Playbill store and at the theatre shop in London. So they're exclusive suppliers for the book. But all of that stuff is easy to find with Baby Book or Freedom Theatricals.
Perfect. And the last question I ask all of my guests, Russell, is what is one word or quote or mantra that you try to live by every single day? Oh, goodness. Well, there was one thing that we talked about a lot over my time working on the London Olympics with the team there, and that was a lot of volunteers there. And I sort of lived by that because I'm a bit of a planner. That was, and I don't know where it came from originally, but that was the phrase, fail to prepare, prepare to fail. And I think that's certainly something that I've lived by in terms of making sure that even now today, as we're talking, which is all very wonderful and easy discussion, but I have plenty of notes around me because that's just how I'm over the years, tainted perhaps, but certainly that's something that I live by. I love it. Well, I thank you so much, Russell, for sharing your story. I'm so excited to hear the work that you're doing and creating and that it's making you happy every day. So thank you so much for being here. Thanks, Kerry. Love catching up with you as always. Look forward to seeing you soon.